I have a huge update to a story I covered yesterday, and I'm just going to be honest and upfront right away. It put a smile on my face. I was grinning ear to ear like a child who just met Optimus Prime at Universal Studios theme park. Like, this was good news that they dropped because it showed signs of life for the little guy against an evil soulless corporation known as Nexon. I'll quickly bring you up to speed with a little speed run of the lore here. Dark and Darker is a game that's not even fully out yet. They've done a few playtests, and I am a huge fan. I've played every playtest thoroughly, hard addicted to the playtests, and it's just a beloved game at the moment that was unjustly pulled from Steam due to a DMC copyright takedown issued by Nexon, claiming that Dark and Darker and the developers behind it, Iron Mace, stole from them, both stole assets and also stole the idea from Nexon's unreleased project called P3. Now, there's a lot more muddying of the waters, but that's the gist of it. Nexon had the game removed from Steam. It has been taken down because Nexon has cease and desisted Iron Mace. So Dark and Darker is effectively dead at the moment since they're unable to continue working on it. Otherwise, it'd be a legal matter. So they have to cease all operation on it, put the kibosh on the whole project while they engage in this lengthy and expensive legal battle with Nexon. Now, Nexon you probably only know from Maple's story, but they have hundreds of millions of dollars at their disposal that they're probably going to throw against Iron Mace to try and bully them legally into shutting down because, as I said in the last video, it seems like they're just upset that they missed out on the chance to milk the golden udder of this cash cow, Dark and Darker. They had a similar idea, but one that they were unable to fully realize on their own, and Dark and Darker has absolutely fucking crushed it. So they're mad, and this is their way of lashing out and throwing a temper tantrum. And even if they do win in court, they certainly lost in the court of public opinion. This whole stunt from Nexon has been a reputation ruiner. Not even like Nexon was in good standing with gamers in the first place. They're a fucking scummy company for a million other reasons, but this one went above and beyond the level of shittiness most people would have expected from them. Their greed is just this open, festering wound that I can't wait to pour salt in, because this update I have for you is good news. Iron Mace went full fucking barbarian mode on this one and just slapped around this lawsuit, at least in terms of like debunking the core points and dismantling a lot of the arguments they tried to make. So I want to show you their response so we can go over it together, because I think they did a great job at laying the smack down here and defending themselves. In the cease and desist from Nexon, they note that there's a lot of similarities between the files of Dark and Darker and the files in their project P3. It says the comparison of resources in the folder created when installing Dark and Darker to those when installing P3 game shows that these two games had 2,338 files with the same names. Even if we exclude the number of files essentially included in the Unreal Engine itself from the above, more than 1,000 files have the same file name, and below is a list of the resource file names that are identical in Dark and Darker in the P3 game. So they went through and listed out all these files, and Iron Mace went through and made a spreadsheet showing these files that are listed in this lawsuit in Exhibit D, and where they came from in Dark and Darker. As you can see, the astute observer will notice the vast majority of these files come from the Unreal Marketplace. They are fucking Unreal assets. They do not belong to Nexon, and Nexon cannot claim ownership over these assets. I have played 1,000, 5,000, 20,000, nay, 100,000 shitty Steam games that have all used similar assets, so I notice a lot of the same things in those games to Dark and Darker. They are there for a reason. They are fair game for developers to use. I'm not saying that to say that Dark and Darker is lazy and these assets are shitty. The point is, I have seen these assets used in thousands of games. They are not Nexon's. They did not steal these from Nexon. The reason why they're going to share the same names is because they're the same fucking assets. And in the document, you'll even see a section of files that don't come from the Unreal Marketplace. They are made by Iron Mace, and they explain that the reason these have similar names is because they're relying on the same fantasy tropes that have existed for a long time. Thus, the files in P3 that bear a similar name is because it's in the same goddamn the same goddamn genre that has existed for so long, so of course the names are going to be similar. They are not Nexon assets, and they did a great job of showcasing this here by taking the file that was named in the Exhibit D section of the cease and desist and showing exactly where it came from in the Unreal Marketplace, for example, which I think completely debunks that whole claim of stolen assets. So it really seems like this whole stolen asset claim is a load of horseradish. I expected that maybe they'd try and make a claim like, oh, actually, the prison bars used in Dark and Darker were lifted directly from P3, and here's proof of that. But they didn't even do that. They listed all of these files, and it was very easy for Iron Mace, although I'm sure it was a laborious and tedious process, to take those files that were listed in this cease and desist and be like, no, the reason these are similar is because it's a fucking asset on Unreal. So to me, that just seems like an easy slam dunk. So at best, this claim was incompetent. And at worst, a malicious attempt to bully a smaller developer because you're a very petty evil corporation. So now let's get into their statement here. I'm not going to read everything verbatim, I'm just going to be picking out the most important pieces to the overall story, though I highly recommend reading their entire statement if you're interested in all of it. Nexon states that according to their investigation, Dark and Darker appears to have been built and developed using trade secrets and copyrighted information copied and stolen from Nexon. We would like to show that these allegations are baseless, no copyrighted materials or misappropriated trade secrets from Nexon were used by Iron Mace. The next paragraph highlights that P3 was only registered a month ago, meanwhile Dark and Darker has been public for more than 6 months. And then they get to the first point of contention, where one of their members was accused of acquiring and transferring key assets to his personal server without authorization. So Iron Mace elaborates on this, telling the whole story, which I won't read the entirety of, I'm just going to give you the cliff notes here. Basically, the accused member, the former Nexon employee, was working from home due to COVID-19 protocol remote work policy and was utilizing personal servers, but these servers were the subject of approvals and reapprovals, so he was under the impression that his actions were accepted by Nexon and it wasn't a problem. Eventually, the Nexon employee decided to leave in June of 2021 due to a breakdown of trust with one of his superiors and due to the uncertain atmosphere at the company. So he turned in his badge and left the office and decided to pursue his own path here, but he worked closely with his development team during his time at Nexon and informed them about his plans to leave, and made it clear that the reason for leaving was due to the uncertain atmosphere fostered at the company, and also stated that he'd welcome the team's talents for his next endeavor. He made it clear that he'd likely pursue a project in the same genre as P3, but explicitly clarified that any development would be made completely from scratch. This fact has been noted in witness testimony collected by the police investigating a separate personal lawsuit filed against the accused member by Nexon. That is a huge piece of this pie here. So even though he did talk to the former employees here, the former team about, pursuing a game in the same genre as P3, he made it clear to them that it would be unrelated and everything would be built from scratch. The only thing it would share is the genre, which again, you can't copyright a genre, especially one that's been around for as long as fantasy has. It's fantasy tropes, right? You can't copyright fucking wizards, magic, swords, spears, and shields, and archers, and all that. Like, it just doesn't work. The only thing they shared in common was that setting and the fact that they were extraction-based games. It's not something that you should be able to copyright since it's already an established genre and established setting. So I feel like this is a crucial piece of information here, that it was made clear and even has testimony backing it, that even though it was in the same genre as P3, everything would be made from scratch, and it wouldn't be just P3 again. It was going to be its own identity. Now, continuing on, they talk about how once Nexon became aware of this member's plans to leave the company, they decided to send the internal audit team after him. They sicked the hounds on him. So they started to immediately accuse him of stealing files, even though they had been able to observe his activity for a long time now and had no problem with it up until, I guess, he decided to leave the company. So he got fired based on these unproven claims and subsequently sued by the company a month later. And that personal lawsuit is still ongoing, and he's been the subject to multiple search warrants, as has Iron Mace, and so far they've found nothing to substantiate any of these claims or any of these accusations against them. So this poor guy just wants to make a good game, and he can't help but get sued more than McDonald's here by Nexon, who's holding a grudge against him. So he and Iron Mace have been the subject to multiple searches from authorities, and still they have found nothing to substantiate any of their claims. There is no evidence to back up anything Nexon is claiming. The next claim they tackle is the takedown notice submitted by Nexon alleges that the founder of Iron Mace, Terrence, knew that the accused members used stolen trade secrets and copyrighted material to develop Dark and Darker to knowingly benefit oneself and Iron Mace, basing this claim purely on past association and without offering any proof. The founder of the company has no knowledge that any stolen trade secrets or copyright material were ever used to develop Dark and Darker. In fact, the founder has on multiple occasions told members of his team they must be extra diligent in ensuring that everything is done by the books in order to uphold the vision and branding of the company. The takedown notice then states that Nexon's P3 game has never been disclosed to a third party during this period in an attempt to strengthen their claims that the only way to have come up with a similar idea was to have stolen it. However, this claim can be clearly proven false. Nexon disclosed P3 in a media showcase in August 2021 to members of the gaming media who then wrote about it in multiple blogs and articles as shown below, and then they dropped the fucking receipts here. So they lay the receipts out on the table. They say, here's the buffet of proof. Would you like to take a slice here? And clearly show that P3 was revealed to the public well before Dark and Darker. It's not something that was, kept under lock and key in a vault buried underground where only a few people had access to the information of its existence. This is something that they publicly showcased at one point. Thus, it's not like it was stolen from them, and again, it's a genre. It is a genre. You can't own the entirety of an entire fucking genre. It's not yours. Iron Mace also recognizes and calls attention to this fact. The takedown notice then states that no other games had the same concept, genre, and plot as the P3 game, even though none of those contents of these categories are original, and other games like Expedition Agartha have all three that are similar. The notice then states that within a mere 10 months of forming Iron Mace, its demo/test version of Dark and Darker became publicly available in August 2022. The notice states that it is impossible for Iron Mace to have developed Dark and Darker in such a short time frame without using Nexon's trade secrets and confidential information, again, without offering any proof. And then their response is, just because it may be difficult for a large bureaucratic company such as Nexon to develop games in such a short time frame does not mean that it's impossible for another studio, big, small, new or old, to develop games quickly. Holy shit, stand back, they're preaching right now. You don't have to be bilingual to understand this language of facts that they're laying down right now. They're saying that this is an outrageous claim just because you are a mismanaged corporation that can't roll out games in a meaningful time frame doesn't mean every video game company is as poorly managed as you are. Games can be developed in a timely fashion without ever playing dirty or stealing from other places, and they're absolutely right. A lot of these big studios are extremely slow with updates or anything at all for their games, and it's not because it's impossible, it's because they're just not managed properly. You see indie games all the time able to make patch upon patch in really quick time frames because they're passionate and they work effectively. And even some big studios do as well. It's not all of them, of course, but you see it time and time again for a lot of big ones. This is a very factual statement here, and it's a stupid claim for them to make. There's no way in such a short time frame they could make a game. It takes us 15 years to make MapleStory 1.5. Like, there's no way. No, it doesn't make any sense. They had to have stolen from us. It's stupid. And Iron Mace also calls out the fact that this is generic fantasy shit, right? It is tropey fantasy shit. They even list another game that has all three of these similarities that Nexon lists, which was Expedition Agartha. In this genre, a lot of games are going to bear a lot of resemblance because it's established and has been established for such a long time now. So it's not uncommon or unusual for a lot of these games to have very similar things in them. They even expand on this a bit by saying that they have evidence they'll be releasing soon that shows exactly how they built the game so quickly and efficiently. And I imagine this is going to be like alpha footage of the game during its development. And interestingly enough, I have actually heard a couple streamers that were talking about this mention that they've seen Dark and Darker when it was still in the alpha. So you can see that it was entirely built like by them from scratch and also using the assets. So it should be a very easy thing for them to prove, and I imagine that's going to be yet again another easy layup for them. The statement then goes further, hammering the point home about the file similarity that Nexon's hung up on, explaining that once again, they are Unreal assets for the most part, or general fantasy concepts that of course are going to share similar names in the files because they're similar concepts. Nexon then makes the claim that even if they are purchased from the Unreal marketplace, it doesn't explain why the character assets and all of that are identical to P3. So then they had to explain to them that it's general fantasy shit, so of course it's going to look similar. They're both playing in the same fantasy realm, so the character is obviously going to look similar. And then they touch on why, like, the concept art looks similar to P3. And I can't even believe this needs to be said, but it did need to, and Iron Mace makes the statement that the character concept artwork for both games were created by the same individual, explaining the similarities in style. Obviously, they have the same artist here that worked on both games, and he's no longer at Nexon. He is now with Iron Mace. It's not like he's going to drastically change his artistic style, so clearly some of the concept art and art pieces are going to bear resemblance. It's the same fucking person who did art. So clearly that explains that. It's not that he stole art from Nexon. It's just the same goddamn guy doing the art, and he has an individual style. I love this next part. The notice then states that the level and extent of the two games' key concepts, genre, and storyline make it clear that Iron Mace must have used Nexon's trade secrets to create Dark and Darker. And again, both the concepts and storyline are purposely traditional and generic and can be found in many fantasy games, including pen and paper RPGs, which was one of the main inspirations for Dark and Darker. The premise of adventurers delving into dungeons full of monsters and treasures in their quest to seek riches is so generic and common that it can be broadly applied to numerous other fantasy games. Just for fun, we asked ChatGPT to come up with a description for a generic PvP dungeon crawling game that created an eerily similar game description below. So, and then here's that description that ChatGPT came up with. The point of this was to showcase just how generic all of the concepts and everything in Dark and Darker is, and purposely so. It's all just traditional RPG established elements, nothing new. They didn't reinvent the wheel, they just did a very great job of it. They utilized it beautifully and made a very fun and unforgettable experience out of it. But at its core, it is generic fantasy, top to bottom. In closing, Iron Mace states, given the information presented, it is difficult to believe that Nexon, in good faith, could reasonably believe that Iron Mace has infringed on the copyrights for their P3 project. They also provide no actual evidence that Iron Mace misappropriated Nexon's trade secret information in the creation of Dark and Darker, but instead base it on circumstantial claims. Finally, they accuse Iron Mace of a flagrant breach of Valve's SSA and SOCR, restricting our ability to provide our game to players on the largest mainstream PC game platform and severely obstructing our ability to do business. Iron Mace requests that Nexon renounce their baseless claims. If they would like to compete on merit, we welcome Nexon to promptly accommodate the comparison of source code, custom assets, and design documents with the police to quickly and decisively put an end to this matter. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful statement from Iron Mace. I think this was an incredible job from their team here in defending themselves. I don't see any merit to Nexon's claims at all anymore. Even going into this, I thought they were shaky and shoddy at best, but now they seem just completely baseless, and I think Iron Mace has done a great job of, at the very least, clearing their name to the public from the few people that thought maybe Nexon did have a case here. I'm very happy with this update, and I'm optimistic that this lawsuit, should it continue going forward, will actually be ruled in favor of Iron Mace. Nexon doesn't really seem like they have a whole lot in the tank here unless they have all kinds of new information that they haven't revealed. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. Dark and Darker is an amazing game that I'm still extremely excited for, and I hope this gets resolved quickly because I want to do the next playtest ASAP. So that's really about it. See ya.